Hi, I'm Andrea.
Hey, y'all, this is Courtney, and welcome to the Human Design and Liberation podcast.
This is a space where we explore how human design and liberation theology intersect with the past, present, and future,
with the intent of sharing the beauty and pain of the human experience to encourage you in your liberation journey.
Hey, we're back.
We are back. So happy to be back.
Yes, feels very good to be back and diving in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for this episode. We've been talking about this for a long time. So
yeah, it's been a few weeks.
I feel like that time is going to give us a chance to kind of cover maybe more complexity than we would have if we had tried to record it back when we first had the idea. So
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we had we talk weekly, just catching up, because we're friends and stuff. We like each other, even, when we're not recording. And we were chatting, and I said something about, we're both moms, both have 2 kids. And I said something about, I wish I had kids later. And it really brought something up for Andrea about this idea of like wishing differently, just like wishing differently. You said something that really still sticks with me, which was that, well, this was your children's time to come. They have a role to play in the world, and it was their time to enter into the world. And I hope I never forget that, because it really just snapped so many things into perspective. But it also kind of created this idea, opened up our imagination for this episode around binary. It's a word that's used a lot in human design, a lot. And I initially was like, it rankled me a little bit, because I am, a millennial. Millennials decided that we hate the binary. Thankfully, we came around and was like, this isn't good. This does not serve us. The gender binary, the like cultural binary, and kind of ethnocentrism, and anything that kind of feels like it pits one way of being against another way of being. And so when I kept coming across this word as I'm learning, I'm on my human design journey, I'm like, what is Ra talking about? I don't really like this. There has to be something else, another word. And so this kind of came up in our conversation, and it really was cool, because we realized that in actuality, our, society's been using it wrong. Society has been mishandling the language, which is definitely a big part of just authoritarianism in general, is kind of commandeering culture for its own ends. And this is one of those moments where we were able to, like, wait, what? This is actually cool.
I was actually, when you just said that, the instance that came up for me was this recent, like, DEI mayor. Like,
oh my God.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Did they actually say that? Like, but that is just such a great example of how authoritarianism, stakes claim around terms that it has no idea what they mean. Or like critical race theory. Like, that's another one.
No interest.
No idea even what it means, but just throwing it around and banning books because of it. That's, taking very harmful action because of something that they don't even know the definition of.
Exactly. So yes.
Let's just talk about what the binary is in human design, and what a binary is in general. And so a binary is when you have 2 parts.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that this whole wave of deconstructing and rejecting the binary when it comes to gender is absolutely relevant, because gender, as we know, doesn't only have two parts.
Right. Exactly.
Right? When it comes to human design, each of us is made of a design crystal and a personality crystal. And this is literally where they're located. And those are the two parts that Ra is talking about. That is the binary that Ra is talking about. And the journey that we are on is to trust more and more in our design.
Yes.
Which is our physical form. So we have our physical form and we have our consciousness. And those two are operating together to create this human existence. And where we have been over-focused is really on the consciousness.
Right.
So, one of the things that was a part of this conversation is recognizing that these two parts of us need to be in harmony. And in order for them to be in harmony, our consciousness, our awareness has to be in service of the body.
Yes. Yep. It does. And to connect, even what I said earlier about, kiddos and when we became parents, this idea of binary also comes in a sense of like, there's things that we're here to engage in and gifts and experiences that we are given in order to play that role. And then we are going to notice that there are going to be experiences and gifts and things that pass us by along the way. And it's important to recognize that that is a part of harmony. That's a part of being in harmony and, with our consciousness and the body, as well as, in our experiment, as we're living day to day and we're reflecting on the life that we have and the design that we have. I know a lot of people sometimes feel like design envy. That's like a big, it's very, very, very normal when you look at human design. I definitely had manifestor envy for a hot minute. And then I saw the whole emotional business and I'm like, never mind. For the emotional manies, I'm like, I don't want that. But again, this whole episode is really to reflect on like what is and what isn't, what we have and what we don't have, our conscious and our unconscious, and this idea of binary, this idea of like the two parts of our human experience and how to feel in harmony with it. It's not about, like a magic wand, but it's about finding that sense of balance and harmony in our experience.
Yeah, and really wholeness. So when we think about these aspects, you cannot be whole without both parts. Like you cannot be whole without both the design and the personality. And a big theme, I think, that comes up as we are navigating supremacy delusion is a hyperfixation on one part of the total. So in the case of you wanting to have kids older, right? There are just realities that come into play with when you have kids. And there are, your life force is needed for bringing those kids into the world, for raising them. And so really recognizing that energy that you're putting out is part of the wholeness. It is not separate. And so recognizing that there is some misalignment with what our culture, with what supremacy delusion really exalts, and needing to grieve that, your energy going towards something that is so beautiful and so fulfilling is demonized in our culture and is weaponized. It's worse than demonized. It's really weaponized, right?
It is.
And so being able to hold the complexity of that and knowing that in order to feel the joy of having your kids and seeing them grow and experiencing them, you also have to grieve what our culture puts on us and what we miss out on and how we are not taken care of in the process of bringing these lives into being, right? And so it is that seeking that wholeness and recognizing that you have to have all of those parts together in order to have a full human experience of whatever it is you're going through.
Yeah. That makes me think of also just even my identity journey as a Black woman. And this falling in love with who I am. I realized actually very recently, I was journaling about this, that self-knowledge truly changed my life. I grew up in a situation, in a place, in an environment where identity was Christian, was your religion, your gender, and your kind of like your role. Like gender and role were very connected, right? So like I wasn't just a woman, I was a daughter, or, and I was a daughter wanting to be a wife, and then wanting to be a mother. So it wasn't just woman, it was like all these other things attached to it. And exploration into my Blackness was not a big part of, was not available, certainly was not available outside of my home. There just was not a lot of places outside of my family and my home. There wasn't a lot of places where it was celebrated. And I struggled with a lot of self-esteem issues and just a sense of like not really knowing who I was supposed to be. You know what I mean? Just like, who am I supposed to be here? How do I, like you were saying, fulfill myself and fulfill everyone's idea of me? The roles that I'm being given, plus the desires of my heart. How do I do both?
Yeah.
And I struggled with that for a long time, as I think a lot of people do, but I think particular Black women. And so when around 2014, actually, I was pregnant with my first child around the same time this was happening. And I began reading and learning more about my Black identity. And it truly changed my life. It was a source of such deep self-love for me. And also grief, right? Also, grief was right there alongside of it. What my ancestors had to go through to get me here, how I got here based on all the struggle and the frustration and the demonization, as you were saying, of my identity. And yet they fought through it all and got me here. But the self-love that was planted in me through learning all of that was just, it literally transformed my life. It transformed my relationships with people who weren't supposed to be in my life. It transformed my relationships with people who had come into my life and were there as like beacons of hope and inspiration, and just incredible Black women that I was able to befriend during that time in my life. And it gave me my voice back. It gave me my sense of self-expression, sense of self. It just gave me my sense of self back.
Yeah.
But like you said, I had to experience both sides of it. I had to experience the grief of learning hard things about who I was and my ancestry, to experience the joy of being who I am, right? So yeah, that's just what came up in me as we're talking about this.
Yeah. And I think it's so relevant to what we're grappling with today, you know, to being alive in this moment and having the stark contrast that we have of, you know, desiring everyone to flourish and knowing that that's possible. Meanwhile, this idea that not everybody can flourish at the same time is also flourishing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And this, I think there's this third piece of white supremacist delusion, which is to recognize any of this, to name any of it, is against our collective flourishing. To treat it as a reality. Just as I know that in the news right now, I believe it was either Georgia or Alabama has gotten rid of DEI, not just the offices in Alabama, not just the departments, but it's the subject matter in the classroom, anything that they've deemed quote unquote divisive. This idea that and I'm going to say this in a very personal way, that my history, that learning about the things that transpired 10, 20, 50, 100, 150 years ago, in terms of how different groups of people were treating each other and what was the result of those experiences and moments in history, can be labeled in some way divisive and therefore taken out of curriculums, and people, Black people and white people, not given the opportunity to learn who they are. That can be misconstrued and perverted into this idea of protecting them, protecting their idea of who they are, is completely outrageous, and it's completely what we're trying to in this podcast dispel. That the more you learn of yourself, the more you reflect upon how you got to where you are, can in any way be detrimental. It is only ever something that will build your identity, your sense of self, and your capacity for joy as yourself.
Absolutely. And also, it will only jumpstart your healing. This topic about, you know, what's going on in Alabama, because it's not just this. It reminded me of something that one of your colleagues posted. I was trying to find the post. He is a Row House author that published the New Black History. Jermaine Fowler, yes. And he shared this literally yesterday, and it was comparing these actions that are taking place with the percentage of the population that enslaved people held. And I particularly remember that Alabama was literally 45% of the population pre-Civil War were enslaved. And it was, you know, the top 10 states. The only one higher than that, I think, was South Carolina. Obviously, Georgia is up there. Florida is up there. So when we look at the resistance to fully understanding what has transpired, to your point, not that distant history, you know?
Right.
Obviously, the more concentration of the harm that was done, the stronger the resistance. And also the bigger the breakthrough once that resistance is surpassed.
100%. I mean, just think of, even in the face of everything that Alabama and Alabamans have gone through, that's still the birthplace of Angela Davis. That's still, you know, where the Montgomery bus boycott happened. That's still where the Edmund Pettus Bridge is. I mean, you think about the significance of that place and who has come out, and this is just the past, we're talking about the present and the future of these areas, which always happens, the saying, they tried to bury us not knowing we are seeds. It's truth. It's really just the truth of the matter. And what I love about human design is that it always takes it further. It always takes it beyond the identity groups that we have been given to identify ourselves, into differentiation, into dealing with our individual personalities and design consciousness is so that we can truly see all the facets of our greatness outside of any type of limiting language around identity that we're given by our society, who does not want us to know ourselves. I think that's the point. We do not live in a society that wants us to know who we are. And this is a tool to liberate ourselves from the desires of that oppressive society.
Yeah. And also to be able to see the influences, like to see what is truly our own uniqueness and what has been transposed onto us from the influence of that society. 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll link to the post that I mentioned in the show notes. But I think that what I would love for all of us to consider is where do we need to be building capacity to be able to hold that complexity? Where do we need to be grieving? Where do we need to be releasing so that we can experience more joy? Because joy and grief exist on the same thread. And so often people who are feeling like their life is boring or unsatisfied in their life or frustrated, it's because they're avoiding those emotions that society has deemed unproductive.
Oof, that part.
Right? Because we are not as productive when we're grieving. We talked about this in the grief episode. And so in order to experience more joy, you have to allow yourself to grieve. And so back to this conversation around like when you're having kids, right? Like being able to grieve the fact that maybe you didn't have what you wanted to have in place when you had your kids, right?
It's true.
So allowing yourself to grieve that enables you to hold the space for the truth of the matter is that there was a lot of beauty and you gave everything that you had, and that has to be enough. Right. And that brings in a little bit of like non-dualism of like, it's all coming back to the whole. These are all parts of the whole. And you cannot have wholeness without the full spectrum of feeling.
Yes. I really appreciate that you said that, especially about grief, because when I look at, this wasn't supposed to be like a newsy topical episode, but it fits so beautifully into this. But one of the core arguments around this idea of DEI in school, critical race theory in school, even though it's not in anything lower than 12, than like college. What is it? Emotional, there's another where ELA, emotional learning, those types of things. The argument against all of that is that kids are in school to learn math and reading, and they need to learn these skills to be able to go into the workplace. This idea of like, we are supposed to be educating children for production, for productivity, not for, this social emotional learning or being critical of the country that they're in and its history and understanding where they came from and all of this nonsense. They need to learn how to get out there and get a job. They need to learn how to be competitive against, the Chinese or the whoever you want to plug in to be to fear monger and so forth. And so it really does connect that this idea, it comes down to productivity in our society. And what we're talking about it flies in the face of that. It's how you live. This is how you liberate yourself from the hamster wheel, from being reduced down to how much you can produce. And grief, understanding your binary consciousness, your experience, your differentiated experience, and allowing yourself to grieve the things that are not yours, or that the things that are yours that you wish weren't, that are hard to carry. To grieve those things is what brings you, that's what brings the harmony. That's what allows the joy in and brings the harmony and wholeness. And I don't want to use the word produce, but I want to say maybe experience. What you can experience grows astronomically out of that process. So you're not just a machine. You're a fully integrated being who does work, because that's a part of our being.
I believe we're created to work. I believe we are created to serve. We're created to be of service. And that's why it brings us so much joy to be of service. That was actually like the title of my very first coaching business. So.
Oh, wow. Yes, it's so true.
Throwback. Yeah.
Throwback.
I think what's interesting about what you're describing, though, if we look at these institutions, they were all created prior to 1781. Even the way that we are educating, what we believe we should be educated on, has been modeled from Western European education, which was modeled from Roman education. And it's really, again, centered on survival and enlightenment. And the kids today want to be in communion, and they want to express. Like, where we have blown past this desire for survival, and our systems and structures have just not caught up to that yet. Like, the resources for everybody to be able to commune and express, they exist.
Yes.
We surpassed that barrier. Okay. And maybe we only surpassed it in the last 50 years. I don't know when, at what point we surpassed it, but we did. We're on the other side of that. And so now it's a question of redirecting those resources so that everybody has the opportunity to commune and express. And maybe part of that expression is going to look different, right? Like, maybe, if you are a Bezos and that expression involves having 7 houses, like, okay. Like, I mean, I don't think that should be legal, actually, but that's my radicalization around the dwellings that we could do a whole podcast episode on. But
yes, please.
The reason I bring that in is to say, I'm not saying that we need to, combat survival with homogenization, because a lot of people jump to that conclusion of like, oh, so you just want to tell me I can only wear blue shirts and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, that would go against expression. Like, there still needs to be space for expression, and also everyone's needs need to be met so that we can.
Absolutely. Because we have enough.
Yes.
So
we've proven that fact.
Right. I love everything you just said. That's it. I just love everything you just said. No, but truly it's, we've done it. We've done what we were supposed to do. And, what's happened along the way in my belief is that we have commodified a part of the cycle
Mm.
and is holding us back from completing the cycle.
Mm.
It's almost like people have set up camp in the part of the cycle of produce, expand, produce, expand, produce, expand, produce, expand, you know?
Mm.
And it's not, I really like, the reason why I love what you said so much is that it's not demonizing the part of us that wants to produce and expand.
Right.
And the fact that we did it, I mean, there's some ways that we did it that were not great, but there have been some course corrections all along the way. There are more course corrections to come.
Yes, there will be more.
And we have done it. We have produced and expanded to the point to where we have what we need. Now what has to happen and what is happening is us breaking down the camp around this part of the cycle and allowing the cycle to continue, to complete the self-expression and the safety, because we are safe. We are out of survival mode.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that really strikes me in that encampment, that idea around encampment, is the reaction, the retaliation against this generation coming through saying, we're good. Like we feel safe. And it's like, oh, look at you and look at how you have taken for granted what you've been given. This safety. You don't know what it took to get here, and you're throwing it in our faces. Like this kind of like authoritarian backlash is happening in the younger generation. The previous generations are feeling hurt in this sense that it's almost like they feel like all their efforts are being thrown in their face.
I think part of it's that. I think also part of it is just fear. I think
totally.
A big part of it is fear. Like the only way we are able to stay safe is if everybody's afraid of staying safe. And if somebody's not afraid of staying safe, then we're not safe.
It's so true.
No, that's not how it works. That might be how it did work. Okay.
Maybe.
I'm not going to negate that when there were lions and tigers and bears roaming, that everybody needed to be worried about staying safe.
Right.
And that's just not the reality that we live in right now. And so this fear of like, if I don't instill all of these fears into the next generation, then we're going to implode.
Yeah.
Is just misinformed.
Yeah.
It's really misinformed. And, we just recorded the 2027 podcast. So if you're curious more about that, go back and listen to that one. But I think that the opportunity here is to recognize that the internal safety is the only safety that we're going to have.
That's right.
That's the only safety that we have access to. It's really the only safety we've ever had access to. But especially in the last 200 years, it's the only safety that's existed. And I think that's the reason why, especially Black femmes, but the Black community has had such joyful and fulfilling experiences in spite of that scarcity mindset, because of the contrast, right? Because that all of the material safety had been taken away generation.
Yeah.
And so you've had to cultivate that internal safety.
Yeah.
And this is just giving like another layer of that safety, right? Like the identity journey that you have been on and what you've learned about how your design supports you in this work, and that differentiation. And it really is going to show up differently for you versus, let's say, we talked earlier about Dr. Cooper, and, she's a projector, and, just depending on each person's design, right?
Yep.
But, and also getting back to this non-duality and being able to hold the complexity and building that capacity for what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Black femmes have been fighting this fight far longer than anyone else.
Yeah.
Maybe Indigenous women, definitely right along with them. And so just having something that will reflect back to you the purity of your design versus having to kind of piece it together without something to look to.
Yeah.
It can just give you that sense of satisfaction that, oh, everything is being used.
Yeah.
Everything is being used as part of the solution. And I am not meant to destroy myself in this process, because I think that is where the system has still had a hold on the liberation movement. We're breaking that hold.
Yes, 100%. And I feel like one of the ways in which we are experiencing abundance, because we are experiencing abundance, that's what we're saying. When we are not in survival anymore, we are in a time of abundance. And one of the ways that that abundance shows up is information, you know, like in the information age. And so taking advantage of the fact that, and, you know, I don't know. I love Gen Z. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And so like most of my family, you know, my siblings are all younger than I am. And I look to them and I gain so much inspiration from just seeing them live their beautiful lives, all expressing themselves in their own way and just untethered from a lot of the things that myself, you know, my cousin and my other family members that we had to go through. But one of those ways is that we have information. We do not have to depend on the opinion of an authority figure for direction anymore. We don't have to go through our lives informed by secondhand information anymore. We have access to primary sources. We have access to voices from people all over the world, from every single religious and spiritual background, in all different languages. We have the capacity to learn all different types of languages and go to places easier than we ever have. And so it really is a time. This is the time. There's been no greater time to go through the process of learning who you are and to exploring both your personality and design consciousness and exploring your heritage and all of these things, you know, that unfortunately, like you said, that survival mindset, that pre-1781 mindset, seven-centered way of being and seeing wants to instill fear into us about is actually a benefit of all the work that we've done as a species to get us here. And so just taking advantage of that and learning and growing. I mean, there's all kinds of resources that we've talked about in the past episodes. So if you want to go through and look at show notes, if you're looking for a place to start, we have plenty of places where you can start. And then keep following us for more, because we're nerds and we will always be sharing new things to read and know. I know one book that I want to talk about for white-bodied folks is The History of White People by Nell Painter. Is an excellent, beautifully written, slightly humorous even book about the history of whiteness. And so I highly recommend that for those folks. And I also recommend anything by Dr. Janet E. Helms, who's an incredible psychologist out of Boston University, if you're doing any racial identity work.
Absolutely.
So those are my suggestions there.
And we'll link those in the notes.
Yeah.
Well, that was all we had for today. Really great diving into debunking some of these terms that can be a little triggering. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. It helped me when we had this conversation. So I'm hoping it helps y'all too.
And let us know what you want to know about. We have a list a mile long of topics we'll talk about. So don't worry, we're not going to hold up. But we want to hear like what's relevant to you, because chances are that's on the list and we can prioritize it.
Absolutely. Yes. And we are interruptible. We love to hear from you. And if it strikes us, if our strategy and authority respond and it feels like an invitation worthy of the moment, it just feels right for us. We love to just to focus on whatever it is that the community needs. So
yes. We both have major communal circuitry. So
you're totally here for it. Oh, until next time, everybody.
Yes. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning into HD and Liberation podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights into human design and its role in building a life of peace, success, satisfaction, and wonder. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your support by liking, following, and sharing our podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Your engagement helps us reach more people who can benefit from this wisdom. For exclusive content and to join our thriving community, consider becoming a Patreon member. Your support allows us to continue exploring the depths of human design and its potential for life and community transformation. Stay tuned for more fun, thoughtful, and impacting discussions. Together, we're unlocking the path to a more liberated and authentic life. Thank you for being part of HD and Liberation podcast.